The Nintendo 64 is an interesting console. It released in North America way back in 1996, September 1996, and throughout the world it was discontinued varying times and years, but very close to one another in the early 2000s. And during that time period, the console sold around 33 million units, with over 200 million games being sold. Now, not the biggest hit for Nintendo, but like many other consoles, every console pretty much, there are games out there that just have a very hefty price tag if you're a collector for one reason or another. And I'm not talking about like these fake market manipulated games like, that you have an auction house and a grading company, colluding to increase the price of games. I'm talking about games that for the longest time have fetched a very high price tag. And if you're a collector, this can be a problem if you're trying to complete, a full-on collection of a system. The Nintendo 64, there's only around 300 games released in North America from what I recall. And today I wanted to talk about the top 5 most expensive games that were released for the system. Now, this list, I just compiled it from the top 5 games that weren't like variants in a sense, like they're singular games, other than one's kind of a remake, a reissue of a game. We'll talk about that in a moment. But there's stuff like international versions or not for resale versions. I'm not talking about none of those. So these games, very varying price tags. I'm going to talk about what they're going for today as of the recording of this video. And at some point, there was a time I was collecting, every Nintendo 64 game because it just seemed like an easier system to collect for. There's only around 300 games in North America. And at one point, I owned all 5 of these games. Now, I got out of it, and I'll have another video at some point talking about that and the reason why. But I've played these games quite a bit over the years, including when I've actually had them, and through other means, flashcards, emulation, so on and so forth. So today I want to kind of give my ranking. I'm not the biggest on tier making, but I do have some thoughts here with these games. So I wanted to kind of review them, essentially, and kind of give my rankings. So what game do I want to start off with? Stunt Racer. I'm just going to hold it here for a second. Not sure where I'm going to put it yet. Now, Nintendo 64 was not like shy with their racing games. There's tons of racing games for the Nintendo 64. And after having played Stunt Racer and refreshing my memory on it recently, it's a solid-ass game. Like, it holds its own. And unfortunately, a lot of these titles here, the reason that they're rare is a lot of them were either released very late in the Nintendo 64 lifespan, and that would definitely cause like there to be less copies out there, because once you get later on in the lifespan and you're seeing sales data as far as a company goes, you may not be producing as many copies of a game as you would have earlier on in the lifespan of the console. And Stunt Racer, from what I understand, like a lot of titles out there that I've looked at in the past, was a Blockbuster exclusive. It was developed by Boss Game Studios, and it was released at Blockbuster, apparently, October 1st of 2000. Yeah, this game's not really that old. And with it being a Blockbuster exclusive, Blockbuster, they did start selling their games off here and there, very cheap prices. And this one currently, Stunt Racer, I didn't pay anywhere near this when I first bought the game. I did pay a pretty hefty sum, but nowhere near what it's going for now. Right now on price charting, I'm seeing it listed as loose for $499.37 is the data that they have. So let's just say $500. It's a lot of freaking money. Is the game worth $500? In my opinion, no. But if you're a collector trying to catch them all, then maybe it is. It's a solid freaking racing game, though, with all the different, things that you do in it. It's called Stunt Racer for a reason. You're racing around, you're performing stunts, you can do little flips and stuff. It has like a high-res mode, a letterboxed high-res mode, which I've utilized, and it looks really good, but I just prefer having it in the regular mode because letterbox mode, it just makes the screen so tiny. But it's a really good game. The driving in it does feel a little floaty, but it's still a good arcade racer. I mean, the graphics are really nice, the sound is really nice, the design, everything about it is pretty damn nice in my opinion. I wouldn't say this is the best racing game ever, but it's definitely one of the top ones on the Nintendo 64. And it's unfortunate that during that time period, it was, you know, very limited in its release. You had to have a Blockbuster to check it out and possibly buy it when they threw it out there. I'm going to put it at a B rank for now. That may change after I think throughout this video here. Now, the next one, Super Bowling. Super Bowling was one, there's a Japanese release of this game as well. And it was originally released on the Super Nintendo way back in the day, like in the early 90s. And then this version came out like way later on, January 15th, 2000 for, you know, the Nintendo 64. I tried finding any kind of data that I could. I seen some mumbling saying this was also a Blockbuster exclusive. I'm not going to dispute that. I don't remember ever seeing this in the store. Maybe it was a Blockbuster exclusive being released so late in the lifespan of the system. Yeah, I mean, it's just 4 years into the lifespan, but that was pretty late at that time. Like, consoles nowadays last quite a bit longer than, you know, 4 or 5 years. But during this time, yeah, Nintendo 64 had, you know, around that 5 to 6 year lifespan. So 4 years in is definitely kind of late. This one, developed by a kid, like I said, it was released in January of 2000. Right now, this one's going for just shy of $600. Loose copy of the game. Some of these games that were Blockbuster exclusives, or apparently Blockbuster exclusives, you know, it's very hard to come by the manual and the box for them. You know, those aren't the prices I'm talking about, because some of these games are just, you know, those prices double, triple, quadruple if you have it complete, because it's just so damn rare with these titles being rentals anyway. But Super Bowling, nothing to write home about. I mean, it has multiple modes. You can do this golfing mode where, you know, it's simulating playing golf, but you're bowling instead. You know, there's a few other things that you could do in the locker room, but it's pretty standard fare as far as a bowling game goes. I mean, it's no Wii bowling, but it was, you know, okay. I mean, if you're a bowling fan, you might enjoy this game. If you're not a bowling fan, yeah, I mean, it's a sluggish game. The controls are pretty simple once you get, you know, figure it out. Like, without a manual, you might be like, wait, how do I, you know, put power on my throw and all that kind of stuff? You know, after fidgeting around with the controller, you figure it out pretty quick. It's decent. Not the greatest game ever. As far as, like, being a top game on the Nintendo 64, definitely not. I'm going to put it at a C rank for now. Like I said, these may change by the end of my video here. Now, the next one I want to talk about is Worms Armageddon. Worms Armageddon, man, this one by Team 17. Worms, everybody knows Worms. I remember playing Worms on my PC way back in the day. Definitely a fun party game, taking turns, you know, between people. You know, pretty much like a deathmatch with Worms. It was a turn-based strategy game, but essentially it's a deathmatch type game if you're playing against a computer or your friends or whatever. And on Nintendo 64, that's where this console shined with multiplayer stuff, was like 4-player games. And Worms Armageddon was another one, released very late in the lifespan, March 30th of 2000 in the US. So it was just one that was not produced very heavily, being so late in the lifespan of the system. Right now, this one's probably one of the lower priced games on the list. I'm seeing it going for around $250 loose. Like I said, complete, it's going to be way more than that. But $250 loose, yeah, I think that's the lowest price one on this list. But being the lowest price versus the highest price doesn't really matter. I mean, some games are just straight up stinkers no matter what, due to the rarity of the game. Worms Armageddon, in my opinion, no matter how you play these games, they're freaking a blast, dude. Like, Worms Armageddon is one when I was recording this video and I was, you know, capturing footage, I was hooked on it for hours, like just replaying it. I owned this game earlier on when I wasn't collecting. I don't think I owned it right when it came out, but like somewhere a little bit after it. I remember coming up on a copy of it and enjoying it back then. It was like a re-release of, you know, the PC version that came out prior to that, but being on Nintendo 64, it had a good place there. I mean, it would have been nice if this was released earlier in the lifespan. Wouldn't be quite as rare. But yeah, I'm going to put that as S tier. This is like, in my opinion, yeah, there's a lot of Nintendo 64 games that would rank like, you know, very high up as far as the overall library. And I think Worms Armageddon, if not if not S, maybe an A. But it's up there, like well worth playing if that's your style. Of course, this is going to be subjective. Your list may be different, but for me, Worms Armageddon is the shit, man. Definitely one of the best games on the system, and probably out of all these games, one of the best games out of the rare titles that we're looking at today, right? So the next one, let's take a look at Bomberman 64, The Second Attack. So there were several Bomberman games released on the Nintendo 64. This one is a sequel to Bomberman 64. It's a story-based game. It's an action puzzle type game. If you're familiar with Bomberman, you know what's up. But with the story mode, I mean, you're going through a whole story. You're fighting bosses on different planets, getting their bombs and whatnot. Kind of Mega Man style type thing. You got upgrades, all sorts of craziness going on. The game is a little slow paced at first, you know, going through all the story elements. For some people, that may be a put off if you're just like, hey, I just want to play Bomberman. Some people may really enjoy it, but the game's got you covered either way. Like, there's, you know, you got that multiplayer goodness. You can play against CPU, you can play against your friends, and just old school Bomberman action, bombing each other. But then, you know, having that story mode is really what the game is about. And having played through it a few times in the past and then just kind of, you know, refreshing my memory on the game, it's solid. It's a pretty good game. Definitely not one of the greatest games in the console, but it's one definitely worth checking out. You know, if you're not a collector, just, you know, play it on a flash card or emulate it. It's a good one. I mean, it's pretty solid with the design. Some of the bosses, though, can be like a bitch. I mean, I have to say that. Even the first boss, like, if you really don't like have a grasp on the gameplay, you're gonna get your ass handed to you. It's got a decent challenge to it. Like I said, a little sluggish with the story elements. Sometimes you wish you could just skip through shit, but you can't. Like if you die at a boss and you have to go back through it, man, you got to go through that whole cutscene again. It's kind of annoying, kind of frustrating, but still a solid game. Definitely a B in my opinion. Definitely a B. Now the final one on the list, oh my God, Clay Fighter, Sculptors Cut. Now, Sculptors Cut is just a ridiculous game because we had Clay Fighter 63 and a third, and when they were hyping that game up, there was all these different characters that were supposed to be in it, all sorts of things that were shown to people, and then when the game was released, they were cut from the game. So what happens? You get Clay Fighter Sculptors Cut, another Blockbuster exclusive. This one was released May 15th, 1998. And it's the most expensive game on the list. Right now, it's going for around $900 loose. Holy crap, developed by Interplay. I forgot to mention Bomberman was developed by Hudson Soft. It was released December 3rd, 1999. Don't know why I forgot to mention all that. And Bomberman's going for, I didn't even mention the price on that one. Holy crap, I'm skipping around here. $253. So a little bit higher than Worms Armageddon. Pretty close. I mean, if you're looking out for a deal, you'll find one. But back to Sculptors Cut. Sculptors Cut was a Blockbuster exclusive that added most of the content that was cut from 63 and a third, and then it was just a rental. So if you thought you were buying 63 and a third and you're going to get all this content that was advertised in magazines and whatnot, you didn't get it. You had to wait for Sculptors Cut to come out. And I hate to break it to you, man, for how late this game came out in 1998, not as late as most of these titles here. There are just so many better fighting games out there, but on the Nintendo 64, it was very lacking. We did have Mortal Kombat Trilogy. That was one of my favorites on the Nintendo 64. Killer Instinct Gold as well, but you just did not have a ton of fighting games. There's a few others that weren't that great. And Clay Fighter, for me, having played all the Clay Fighter games back in the day, I don't like any of them. I mean, I don't hold any nostalgia for them. Playing Sculptors Cut again, I'm just like, oh my God. Yeah, this game tries to be so much. And with a game, a fighting game, like, balance is a very important thing. The fluidity of the fighting, how the moves roll off with your controller, that kind of thing. And Sculptors Cut, Clay Fighter just doesn't hit any of that. It's a parody game that just doesn't hold up to today. Didn't hold up back then, in my opinion, either. Having played these games back then, I remember not really liking any of the Clay Fighter games. Like, I grew up playing Street Fighter 2 in the arcade, seeing all these arcade fighting games, and there's a lot that came out that mimicked, successful games and tried to be their own thing, and most of them weren't that great. And then you had a few that would pop up, like Killer Instinct, for example, that kind of took from multiple franchises but was excellent. And then you had crap like Clay Fighter that just, yeah, it's a parody game, but as far as like being a parody, trying to be something else and make fun of it, it could have done such a better job. Like, I'm not against parody at all, but the Clay Fighter games were just garbage, man. Garbage. Maybe not the worst game on the Nintendo 64, but definitely the worst out of all the rarest, most expensive titles for the Nintendo 64. Sculptors Cut is a crap game that the only reason it's fetching, $900,000 is just because how rare it is. That's the only reason. A lot of consoles out there, man. Some of those rare titles that people are trying to collect to get them full sets for whatever reason, some of them are just garbage-ass games that are just rare. And Sculptors Cut, maybe you like it, maybe you don't. For me, I don't think it's a good game at all. It might have its charm for a moment, but then when you really get into it, rather spend my time playing something else. So that gets a D rank. Not the worst, but it gets a D. Now looking back over my list, I think S rank for Worms Armageddon might be a little too generous. A little too generous. It's a great game. By all means, great game. But if I'm like trying to consider everything out there as far as Nintendo 64 games go, if this was to be ranking everything, there would be so many titles. S rank. Worms Armageddon very close. Like if there was like an in-between, maybe I would put it there. But Worms Armageddon, definitely. That's my list. Let me know what you think down below. Really appreciate y'all watching, hanging out with me on this one. No rhyme or reason, anything. Just sharing some of my thoughts and opinions on these games. Thanks for watching. Give you guys a big-ass blurry thumb butt like a big foot. Peace out, bye-bye, and boom. Bye.